Hi everybody and welcome back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. I'm your host Chaz Andres, and let's get started with our biggest story of the week. Which yet again is standard. Dominaria has shaken up the metagame in a pretty major way, and at this point, Karn, Scion of Urza, is clearly the main chase card in the set. In fact, a single copy of Karn is worth almost as much as the entire rest of Dominaria combined. Yeah. It's a big deal. A little more on Karn in a moment, but for now it's worth noting that the metagame is actually fairly diverse despite Karn showing up in most of the good decks. You've got mono-red aggro, and black-red aggro, and blue-white control, and white-black, and a ton of other decks, and none of them are all that overpowered at the moment. They all have counters. It's just the fact that they all kind of use Karn too that makes Standard a little bit hard to play. But other than that, this looks like a really healthy metagame. If you're looking for a Standard spec, by the way, take a look at Goblin Chain Whirler. That card looked really good over the weekend in black-red aggro, the deck that's probably at the top of the metagame at the moment. It's good in mono-red too. It's under 2 tickets right now, and it's got 5 or 6 ticket upside easily, with room to grow beyond that potentially. So this is a card I would absolutely be picking up right now if it hasn't spiked by the time you're watching this video. I hope it hasn't, but if not, I'd at least grab a playset of those. Let's move on quickly to gaining ground this week because I really want an excuse to talk a little bit more about Karn. And of course, Karn lapped the competition this week, gaining a full 15 tickets from 30 all the way up to 45. And if you had any doubts that Karn would be Dominaria's #1 chase card with a bullet, doubt no more. Karn is all over the place in the standard metagame, and the fact that it's cheap to cast and colorless means that it's not going anywhere. I can't envision a change to the metagame that's going to involve Karn leaving. This one is here to stay. It's going to be a staple in standard for months and months to come. So this all begs one really important question. How high can Karn actually go? Well, the online price is already about $20 cheaper than the paper price, so theoretically there's quite a bit further it can gain. Of course, the Magic Online market tends to be a lot more efficient than the paper market, which means that prices tend to reach their stasis points a little bit earlier, which means that it's probably close to where it's going to end up now than the paper price, which is being choked by a lack of available packs. But at the same time, the Scarab God, when that was at its peak, the paper price and the online price were about equal, which tells me that maybe the online price of Karn has a little bit further to gain. But at the same time, that set had masterpieces, which kept the paper prices down. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of evidence you can read that can take you in a lot of different directions with this one. Ultimately, I just don't think I can predict Karn hitting that 60 ticket mark. It just doesn't seem likely to me. It wouldn't shock me. It's not out of the question. I just don't think it's the most likely outcome. What I expect to happen is that Karn will hit probably pretty close to the 50 ticket mark at some point over the next week, maybe 2 weeks, then slowly start to come down as more and more packs are opened. I don't think there's going to be a crash here because Karn is legitimately the best card in standard, and it's a mythic rare and it's colorless, so it's going to be worth a lot for a while. But as more and more packs of Dominaria are opened and more people get these into their collection, the price will start to come down. That's just how these things go. Let's move on to Modern, where a couple of cards gained ground this week after dropping over the past couple of weeks as people sold off their extra Modern staples in order to be able to afford to, well, buy a bunch of Karns so that they can play Standard. And that happens every time a new Standard format comes around, and there usually are really good buying opportunities. For example, Celestial Colonnade, which started out around 30, was down to about 14. It's back up around 23 now, probably going to level off somewhere in the 25 to 27 ticket range. There are a few other cards that fit this profile as well, cards like Kolaghan's Command and Noble Hierarch and Inkmoth Nexus, and one of last week's biggest losers, Collective Brutality. And these cards have all shown signs of pulling out of their slumps. They're on the rebound for sure. They're still worth buying now though if you need them. They're only going up from here, at least in the short term, so there's a great chance to get some Modern staples at slightly lower than average prices. Let's move on to our biggest losers, where in Standard, it was Lyra Dawnbringer again, dropping 4 more tickets from 15 all the way down to 11. Now, last week, I told you don't panic, I told you have patience with Lyra, the card will rebound, and this week, I'm doubling down on that position. See, Now, it doesn't include this week's results, but as of the current metagame breakdown, Lyra is the 6th most played card in Standard, and it's a mythic rare, and it's proven really good in battle. I get that Karn is better, but should Karn be worth as much as a playset of Lyra's? I don't really think so. This is a card that will at some point end up peaking back over the 20 ticket mark, I'm pretty sure, so if you want these, if you need them, picking them up for 11 seems totally fine to me. Let's move on to our biggest modern loser, where there are some cards that have tumbled thanks to the seasonal sell-off, but they haven't begun to rebound yet. And that includes last week's biggest loser, Engineered Explosives, which tumbled another 10 tickets from 46 all the way down to 36. That is pretty crazy for a card that's really important in the modern metagame. Now, even though I really like Engineered Explosives long term, and I feel the same way about some of these other cards that are continuing to drop off a bit, like Mox Opal, last week's advice still applies. See if you can wait them out. Don't buy in until you see actual evidence that these cards have bottomed out and begun to rebound. Once they do, you still have a couple of days to buy in near that low, and you don't want to risk buying while the card is still on its way down, like Engineered Explosives. If you bought in last week because it dropped, you would have missed that other 10 ticket discount. So be patient as possible, wait out these seasonal drops, watch the charts, and then buy in at or near that bottom. Now, this week's sneak is kind of a reverse sneak in that it was 40 tickets back in November. It was down to 11 tickets last week, which makes it kind of a reverse sneak, but it's up to about 16 tickets now, and it's a card that I highly recommend you start picking up. I am, of course, talking about Leovold, Emissary of Trest, a card that's an absolute powerhouse in Legacy, and the only reason it's down a bunch is because of treasure chest changes and seasonal sell-offs and a bunch of other things that aren't going to prevent it from gaining value in the future. I don't know when you're going to be able to double your money on this card, but at 16 tickets, you only have to get it up to about 30 to do it. I think that's really, really possible. This one's not going to be reprinted anytime soon, so think about picking up some Leovolds. As always, we're going to end the week by taking a look at that good MTGO Traders Sales data, which gives us a really good idea of which cards are actually selling the most online right now, regardless of the hype. Now, looking at the most sold cards by volume, the name of the game is still stability, and people interested in Standard. Dominaria's top commons, Dominaria's top uncommons, still at the very top of that list. Dominaria's lands, still at the top of the rares list. The only real surprise to me is Steel Leaf Champion, which is surging up the leaderboards. In fact, it was the #2 most sold rare by volume this week. And that's despite the fact that the card has actually dipped under the half ticket mark. That's interesting. Now, it's possible people are only interested in this because paradoxically it is so cheap and it's really good in maybe a budget version of Green Stompy. But this is a legitimately powerful card. It has 5 ticket upside easily, and at less than 2 tickets for a playset, I'm in for a small stack. Moving on to our top 5 by dollar amount sold, we still have a lot of stability. Karn, of course, still the #1 best-selling card of the list by this metric, followed by Walking Ballista and Lyra Dawnbringer and Teferi and Liliana of the Veil and all the cards you'd really expect to be at the top of this list. The only real surprise to me is that Engineered Explosives has re-entered the top 10, which tells me that the buyback of this card has probably begun. So even though this card has continued to tumble down those price charts, I would expect it to bottom out and probably begin to rebound by at least this time next week. That's all I got for you this week. I'm Chaz Andres. Join me next Monday morning for another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.